I just remember like physically hitting the floor of this, dirty hospital room, like crying out like, God, like he cannot be part of this statistic. He needs to be the 20% that survives. This can't be it. The nurses got on the floor with me and they were praying over me. We had one nurse and she said, God told me in my quiet time praying for Ryan that they will know me through this. I was just like, what did you just say? And she's like, he told me they will know me through this.
Well, guys, welcome to another episode of Experience the Truth. Today is a pretty crazy one because we're talking about childhood cancer and a mom that had to walk her son through treatments and remaining positive without blaming God, even though she was facing incredible torment dealing with it, which I can't even begin to imagine what you would have went through having to bear that and have hope and to be an example for those around you, that God would get the glory. So talk to me a little bit about that, of what the specific situation was, the diagnosis, just to give the audience kind of like a brief overview of what we're going to be getting into today, because it's pretty heavy.
Yeah. So it was a rhabdoid tumor that was found. It is extremely rare. There's like there's about 1,000 kids that are diagnosed with cancer every day across like the entire world. And there are about 1,000 kids total that have been diagnosed with a rhabdoid tumor. So there's no like, script of like what treatment looks like. It's extremely, extremely deadly and it's extremely rare. And so
what goes through your mind when you figure that out, that this, what is it called? Rhabdoid?
A rhabdoid.
Yep. Like, what is the feeling when you figure out what this is and the percentile of lives that it claims?
Yeah, we did what every parent shouldn't do, and we Googled it.
Yeah.
And we were pretty dumbfounded. And I just remember like sitting with my husband one day and just being like, okay, well, not us, not Ryan, not this isn't gonna this we're gonna do this. Like there's really no choice. You're in a fight or flight mode and you like feel all the feelings and you cry all the tears and you can be mad. But I don't think at any point I was like mad at God. I was just mad, but not mad at God.
Which is an important thing, and I'm really excited to get into this, because one of the most common things that I hear of why people aren't following God is, if God were so good, why does he allow children to have cancer?
Yeah.
And for you as a mom and your love for your kid, you're pulled between like, God, like I know you're good and you have this love for him, but why him? And I can't even imagine that. And I think from your perspective, it's going to be an incredible testimony for those that really use their situation and tragedy to blame God rather than discover really who he is and lean on him in trials that they face. So I'm excited. And I believe that we prayed about this. I believe that this is going to be powerful for those that are listening right now, that there'd be breakthrough that would happen. So before we get into it, I didn't even mention your name. We just like got right into it. Childhood cancer, like, woo. So I wanted to introduce you first. What's your name? So tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm Steph. I'm originally from Michigan. I grew up in the church. Like it's very cliche.
Yeah.
Grew up Methodist, but also I think by growing up in that form of church and stuff, it was more like I didn't know that you could possibly have a relationship with God. I knew that it was all just like you sit quietly in the pew and you say everything at the same time as everybody else and you close your eyes to pray and everybody, does the doxology and all of the things and then you go have lunch. Like there wasn't like, there was Sunday school and all of that stuff, but there was, and learning the Bible stories, but not understanding like what the actual like relationship part was. And so, as I was into my 20s and early 19 and all of that stuff, I, tried college. College wasn't for me. And I,
I'm sorry. I'm just just going to make sure they hear you loud and
There
clear. There you go.
And so college wasn't my thing. And I tried, moving around a lot, and I just wasn't finding what fit for me. And I'd say around age 20, I finally reached out to a childhood pastor, and I was just kind of at, a dead end of everything. And so I reached out to him and started going to church again and got baptized and all of that stuff. But then I moved to the cities. I moved to Philadelphia, actually, for a nanny job. And again, just did that lifestyle of city lifestyle and all of that stuff. And then I met my husband when I was 24, and he lived here in Minnesota. So I moved from Philly to Minnesota. And
you've been all over.
I've been all over. And we wanted to try for kids right away. So we didn't even like once we got married. And so we didn't even have a honeymoon, because we'd rather have our money go towards a family than go on a vacation.
Yeah. Wow.
So we tried for kids right away, and I got pregnant right away, and then it ended up being a miscarriage. Okay. And then I got pregnant with Ryan just a couple months after that. And so I had Ryan, and then I'd say about 7 months postpartum, I got postpartum depression, so bad. It was crazy bad. They wanted to put me on, antidepressants and all of that stuff, and I just I didn't want to go there, I guess. And so my doula at the time, she was a believer, and she said she was going to a church that was in the town that I live in. And so one day I was just like, something needs to change. I'm not down a good path. I know this is, these are the things that moms talk about that you don't think exist until you're living in it.
Wow.
And so I went to the church that she was at, and long story short, I did a discipleship school and learned to hear God's voice and learned what a relationship looks like with him. And it transformed my life. I literally was like, how does anybody go to church and not know this? How do you grow up in the church and literally just not know what that looks like?
Wow.
And, learning more in depth about the Bible and just, who Jesus was and just all of the things. And it just shaped me going forward as a mom and stuff. So Ryan's come with me to church basically almost every Sunday since, except, COVID. He was a COVID kid by that point, but it was a good time.
Yeah, rough. I can't believe it's been 4 years already.
I know, thank goodness.
That's crazy to think about.
Yeah. So, and then...
so that's your story.
That's my story.
Your, from, real brief synopsis. You grew up in the church. Typically, and then you experienced religion.
Yep.
And tradition reduced it to, this is what we do before lunch.
Yep.
And then you encountered God. And that was funny, because that was similar to, it's always, when people encounter God, because I remember thinking when I encountered God, I'm like, why is not everybody excited?
Why does nobody know about this? This is great. Yeah.
I had a guy, I always share this because it's literally my favorite story. He encountered God for the first time, and he goes, dude, I didn't know what to do with myself. He said, I was so excited. I literally I walked into a Chick-fil-A and I just screamed, God is real. And he wasn't going there for chicken. He just wanted to tell people. He just couldn't he couldn't contain himself.
Yeah.
I just think that's so funny, because it's there's no better way to describe that. So, okay. You have this relationship with God. Right. We're starting from there. Now let's kind of get into the story of how you discovered it.
Yeah.
And then the process of dealing with that, your child having cancer. So let's start from the beginning, and let's kind of roll it out now. Yeah.
So when I went through that discipleship school, we had a time where we were fasting and praying and hearing from God. And God had said to me, the baby will not be a burden.
Wow.
And I just remember thinking, what baby? My kid's a year old now, and I'm like, he's a toddler, what baby? I don't know what you're talking about, but all right, cool. Sounds good, God. And then as time went on and on and on, I was just maybe it's for someone else. I don't know. And then after a couple of years, we decided we wanted to try for another baby. And it was just taking a really long time. Like it took over a year and it was really hard. And I just was like, I don't think there's going to be another baby like this. I don't know what he's talking about, but I just, was starting to lose some hope. And I was actually, at Bethel's Rock for a worship night, and God had said 3 babies. And I was like,
okay.
All right. Well, I don't know if that means, earthbound or total, but that means that Ryan will for sure not be an only child. And so I remember sitting downstairs with my husband, and we, still weren't pregnant. And he was just like, I just feel like you're going to be really unhappy, like if we don't ever have another baby. And I was like, oh, don't worry, we're going to have another baby. And he was like,
what?
And I was like, yeah, God told me 3 babies. So I don't know when it's going to happen, but I know that Ryan's going to, have a sibling. And, my husband's like, haha, okay, crazy lady, like,
yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm fine. Like, we don't have to have this conversation. Like, I'm very, like, God said so. So
yeah,
that's
leaving it.
That's it. And he was like, okay. And then literally like a week later, we found out I was pregnant. And my my mother-in-law is a triplet. So my husband was like, God told Steph 3 babies. And I am like freaking out right now. And I was like, yeah, look I don't look so crazy now, do I? So we found out I was pregnant, and about, I don't know, 2 weeks after that, like when you're not really telling people that you're pregnant, but my husband is a pilot, and his work called, and they, said, we have this position, and we were wondering if you were interested to come in. It would be like office work where you're managing a bunch of pilots, and you would be taking on a little bit more, but we need someone to fill this spot. Mm-hmm. And so he just kind of said, like, I just got to let you know, like, my wife is pregnant. Like, what does that look like for my schedule? And they were like, oh, you can work from home if you need to. You can, work whatever. If your kid is sick, you can stay home. If your wife's having a hard time, you can stay home. And I just remember saying to him, like, go for it. Life can't get any worse or crazy. And I was like, looking back, I'm like,
dun dun. Yeah.
Dun dun dun. Yeah. So, so then around 8 weeks pregnant, Ryan and I flew to Philly to see my old nanny family, and we did a lot of walking in that weekend. Like we walked blocks and blocks and blocks. And at nighttime he would say, my legs hurt. And I'd say, me too, man. Like
it was a tough
we
workout.
just walked like, a couple miles, like my legs hurt too. And I'd just kind of give him a little Tylenol or rub him or something and be like, I get it, whatever. And then we got home and he just kept saying, my legs hurt. And I chalked it up as like growing pains because he's about 3.5 now. And, everything that I'm reading is like, if it's waking them up at nighttime and stuff, that the chances are that it's growing pains. And I was like, okay. And then we started going to like parks and stuff, and he didn't want to play at the park. He wanted to go home. He wanted to be carried. He didn't want to do anything. And I was like, what 3-year-old is like, yes, let's leave the park.
Yeah.
And please carry me. I don't want to run down the sidewalk as fast as possible into traffic. Like no 3-year-old is like,
yeah,
let's do this. And so I just started asking specific questions to him, like which leg, where? And it was always the same leg in the same spot, which is also like normally if, you're that little, they're like right here. And it kind of like moves all over. So I was like, this is concerning. And for me, when I touched it, I couldn't like feel anything. So I was like super like, this is weird.
Yeah.
So finally, after like a couple weeks of this, of him just like complaining and waking up and wanting one of us to sleep with him at night because he couldn't like calm his body down to go to sleep. And, we thought he was working the system. We thought he was like, oh, my leg hurts, come lay with me. And we'd be like, okay, kid, And so I took him to the pediatrician and they did an x-ray and they found nothing. And so they were like, yep, probably just a sprain or something. Give him like a week of Tylenol and ibuprofen on rotation and it should just heal right up.
Yeah. And
like something in my mom gut said no. but I also didn't want to come off as a crazy person.
Yeah.
So we did that. We did a week of Tylenol and ibuprofen around the clock, and he was good because he was drugged up.
Yeah.
And so my husband was like, he's doing great. And I was like, yeah, because he's on meds. Like, I want to wean these meds off and see, like, something just doesn't sit right. And so about a week later, after we had done the meds around the clock, it was summer. We had the little splash kiddie pool out and stuff. And my husband was on a trip because, like I said, he was a pilot. He was playing and he couldn't walk to me. He was like just crying. He literally could not take a step. And I was like, I'm going back to the pediatrician, but I need like proof for them to take me seriously.
Yeah.
So I started recording him and I said, walk to me and I will carry you. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's like struggling and crying and limping. And I immediately went to the pediatrician. It was a different doctor. And I showed them the video and I said, figure it out or send me to somewhere who can figure it out, because it's June. I'm not dealing with this all summer. Like, we want to be outside. We want to be in the pool. We want to be like, we live in Minnesota. We want to take advantage of the summer. So figure it out or send me to someone who will. Mm-hmm. And she like took it a little more seriously. She rubbed the back of his leg and was like, it does feel like something's there, but I can't pinpoint it. Let's do an ultrasound. And I was like, okay, great. So we do the ultrasound, and I remember looking at the screen of the ultrasound, even though, like, to me, unless there's a baby, I can't honestly tell what they're scanning. Like, is that blood? Is that a
what
liver?
Is that?
What is that? No one knows. Mm-hmm. But the screen is pretty small, and there was like this mass that almost took up the entire screen. And I was like, that's not part of a leg. Like, that's something. And I was like texting my husband, like, I don't know what's going on. Like, this is just really terrifying, And he's like, yeah, I get it. But, stay calm. Like, they'll let you know. And so we went home and I put him down for a nap, and he was napping. And the doctor called and she said, there's something on the ultrasound and you need to go to Children's for an MRI. And I was, like, okay, can we pencil that in for like Friday after swimming? Like,
yeah.
And
like,
she
how serious is this?
Yeah. And she's like, mom to mom, you need to go right now. And I was like, okay. Like, my husband's flying. My parents didn't live in Minnesota at that time. My in-laws are 6 hours away. Like, I'm pregnant. Like,
wow.
Okay. So, we get in the car and we go to Children's, and they redo the x-ray and the ultrasound because it's Children's versus, your local hospital.
Yeah.
And they're like, yep, we for sure need to do an MRI, but we're going to admit you because it's like late at night at this point, and, we're going to admit you, we're going to monitor it, and then we're going to do an MRI in the morning, possibly a CAT scan, like whatever. And I'm like, what is going on? And I remember just sitting in there. My cousin, who lives about an hour away, came and like just to sit with me and like hang out and stuff. And we're sitting there, and the entire like oncology team comes in. And they're like, we don't want to freak you out, but and I was like, you don't want to freak me out. Like, what are you all doing in here?
Yeah, for
and
real.
Like, they're like, we don't want to freak you out, but whenever there's like a mass or something that's found, like, we're called. And so we just want to like get on top of this, no matter what it is. And I was like, And so, we ended up staying a couple days instead of just overnight. And my in-laws drove up down from Wisconsin because it wasn't so much that I like needed someone there, but I needed somebody else to hear what everybody was saying to me, because I was kind of like blacking out a little. Like,
yeah, I can't imagine.
Like, I was kind of not fully like aware of everything that was happening. Like, my main priority was like my kid and to keep him happy and like cheerful through all of this. And as they're giving me big terms and big words and not great conversations, like, I needed somebody else to hear it so that like when my husband did come back and whatnot, it could be relayed to him how they actually said it versus me being like, something is going on and I don't know what, like me in a panic state, I guess. So we found out that there was this mass on his sciatic nerve in his leg. And it was pretty large for how little his leg was. Like, I think I have the dimensions at home, but it was pretty large. It was large for sure. Yeah. And the oncology at Children's was like, you know, if they like did the MRI and you could see it and it was kind of like pear shaped with like a little squiggle. And they were like, normally if it is not cancerous, it is spherical. It is like a total circle, no squigglies, no weird shape, whatever to it.
Yeah.
And so I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like, well, it's clearly not circle.
Yeah.
It's clearly not a circle. This is like a pear with a tail. Like, I don't know. And so they were like, but because it's on his sciatic nerve, like he needs to see a specialist to get it removed, and then we will talk about treatment.
What is the sciatic nerve again? Like, what is
it's in your leg. It connects from like your hip to your foot. It is how you are able to bend your leg, walk.
Okay.
All of that. It's like,
it's a big deal. Yeah.
If it's like cut or something, you can like lose feeling from like where it's cut down.
Wow.
Like whatnot. So
interesting.
They send us to a specialist, and the specialist was actually, we had a conversation with him like virtually, and he didn't sit right with me. He was like, yep, this is for sure benign, and if it wasn't causing him pain, I wouldn't even do the surgery. And I was like, if it wasn't causing him pain, we wouldn't know it exists. Like, I'm not taking my kid in for his yearly MRI. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. And so it was like originally like to go in and get a biopsy, I guess is what we originally talked to him about. And he was like, yep, it's for sure benign. Like, you're good, blah, blah, blah. And so we hang up the phone, and I was like, I don't want that guy touching my kid. Like, I don't feel good about this. And my husband's like, what are you talking about? He says it's benign. We're great. We're cancer free. And I'm like, I don't know. Something's just not sitting right. And then, so he went in and he had the biopsy, and I was at church with my sister-in-law, and I remember God saying specifically, they will know me through this. And I was just like, wow. Like, we got in the car and we were at a stoplight, and she was just like, you know, I said, God said to me, they will know me through this. And I feel like that Ryan, like, that tumor is not benign. Like, I feel like it's going to come back as something. Jeez. And I was like, and I don't know what we have to go through, but like, I feel like we have to go through something really heavy right now. Otherwise, they won't, like, you can't just go through everything, and, you know, like, it has to be heavy, like, for people to know God through it, I guess is what I'm saying. And I was just like, and she's like, I felt that too. Like, I felt like God was saying, like, you know, in a smaller sense, like, our family is going to somehow.
Who said that?
My sister-in-law.
Your sister-in-law.
And she married into the family too. Yeah. And she's just like, wow. I just feel like our family is somehow going to, like, have a better relationship with God through this. And I was wow. like, well, I don't know if it's just our family or if it's anybody else, but I was like, I think it's like, I just remember sitting there and being like, well, we're going to do what we have to do, but like, whatever happens, like, even worst case scenario or whatever, like, you know, we never know why things have to happen until we get to heaven. Like, we don't know why God is saying, like, or why, like, obviously God doesn't give my kid cancer, but like, why he doesn't immediately cure somebody, we don't know, because those things, those effects or whatever can help somebody else know God, is how I feel.
Wow.
And so we just had that conversation, and then it was like right before 4th of July. I remember it being right before 4th of July weekend. I just kept calling and calling and calling because I was like, I don't want to get to like this 4-day weekend and then not know and whatever. And so they called us in, and I just remember like there was like 6 people in this teeny tiny, doctor's office room. And I was like, why would there be so many people in here if it was like all good news? And they were like, it's for sure cancer, and it's actually this really, really rare type. And we don't have a lot of information on how to handle it. And they were like, so it was like the social worker and the nurse and the child life and the doctor and the doctor's helper and like all these people. And we were just like overwhelmed. It was just so overwhelming. My husband and I both broke down. And yeah, it was horrible. And they said it was a rhabdoid tumor. They say that it's fast growing. So it could have only been in his leg for like, a couple weeks.
Wow.
But it's so fast growing that it just like, and then it's known to spread to soft tissues throughout your body. Wow. And like, if you don't tackle it fast and hard, like that's it. You're done. And we were just like, what are you talking about? Like, and I remember like different family members being like, well, why don't you go get a second opinion? And I was like, I don't feel like we have time to go get a second opinion. Like I'm trusting our team, and I feel like this is something that we need to do right now. And
Can you imagine if you stuck with that other guy that said it was
right?
9.
And
wow.
Like that would have been it. And I just can't even think back
scary.
To that.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they like put a plan in place. Originally it was going to be like chemo to try to shrink it, and then surgery. And our doctor was like, this is like a really, really big tumor, and I feel like we should do surgery first and then, do some stuff afterwards, like do chemo and stuff afterwards, because we don't know where in the body it has spread to. But he's like, the possibility of it spreading throughout his body like is so high. And if we were to just wait until, like if we were to do the surgery and then wait to see if it spread anywhere, it would also just be too late. And we were like, okay, like we, do what every parent shouldn't do, and you Google it and whatnot. Yeah. And it was like the survival rate was like less than 20%. And, like if you did survive, the chances of it coming back in the first 5 years was like 90%, and just all this stuff. And we were just like, okay,
wow,
like this. Okay. Like, here we go. We're going to be that 20%. Like like we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And, so he had the surgery done, and, they had to cut his sciatic nerve. So he lost feeling from, basically knee down. And they would tell us like, make sure that when he learns to walk again, like, like how we can feel like if you step on a Lego and, you want to die a little.
Yeah.
Like if he were to step on a Lego, he wouldn't know.
Wow. Yeah.
And so they were like, be very cautious with like hot and cold, like, like not being able to feel if something's extremely hot or extremely cold could like cause issues and stuff. And so obviously he did physical therapy and all of that stuff too. But when they did the surgery, they came out and they said, we got clear margins, which is like extremely rare when you're like taking out a tumor and stuff too, to have clear margins, meaning there's no part of the tumor left in from where they took it out. So like we knew that they got the entire tumor, and we were just like so grateful, and that I picked a different surgeon.
Yeah.
And
no kidding.
All of these things, and he was so nice and everything. So then Ryan, had a couple weeks where he recovered from the surgery, and then he started, and then he had a port placed and all of that stuff, and we started chemo. And I mean, he did a couple rounds of chemo. I wouldn't say I was in like a dark place, but there was definitely times where I like felt like I couldn't I couldn't pray. Like, I just felt like I can't even like turn my mind off to like even like say what I need to pray. And I remember like just crying on the phone to one of my friends, and she was like, it's okay. Like, God knows that you are in the fight of your life for your kid right now, and he's not going to be like, why aren't you praying?
Wow.
And she was like, we are praying for you. So just tell us like what your specific needs are, and we'll do that.
Wow.
And I think like something in that moment kind of shifted, because then I was like, this is what we specifically need a prayer for. And like meals started showing up at my door, and, you know, like people just this outpour from not just like the church community, but like my community where I live and just stuff like that too. This is backtracking a little bit, but like when they did, when they took the tumor out, Ryan had this bandage that was like on his leg, and my mom had come up and she was staying with us and whatnot and helping out. And, they said after like 5 days, you need to take this bandage off, you know, and it was like adhesed to his leg. Like it was like super glued to his leg. And I was like, haha, cool.
Yeah.
And I was like looking up how to loosen adhesive, and it was like soak in baby oil, or, you know, just all these things. And
He was going to get waxed.
I'm like, we were like soaking it and all, and it was sensitive spot, and he had surgery and all these things. And, I told my mom, I said, okay, I'm going to give him one of his painkillers, you know, that we were given not very often at this point. And I said, I'm going to give him one of his painkillers. And once it kicks in, we can work on taking this bandage off.
That bad.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was like really on. And so she was so nervous, and she's like, it's just not coming off. Why don't we just soak it again tomorrow and try again? I was like, no, I already gave him the meds. Like, I don't want to waste it. I don't want to waste this, you know, opportunity. Like, we just need to get it off. Like, we just need to do it. I was laying back in like a lazy boy chair, and I had him gripped, and he's screaming bloody murder, and it's just not coming off. And I just like hugged him as tight as I could. And I just said, God, please just let this Band-Aid just like fall off. Like, we can't do this. This is exhausting. I just need this Band-Aid to fall off, and I need Ryan to just get up and run around. And my mom goes, it's off. And I was like, what? And she's like, it came off, and she like held it up, and then Ryan got up and like ran off to go play. And my mom was like, her face, like, and my mom's a believer, and her face was like as white as your shirt. And she was like, I was like, yeah, okay, well, great. It's done. Like, I was just like, okay, cool. And Ryan's like off running around, and she told me like the next day, she's like, I've literally like rubbed my hand against his leg and checked to make sure that I didn't miss something. She's like, I literally thought it was still somehow on there, and that like,
wow, because
it was so stuck. And then as soon as I prayed, it just fell into her hand. And she's like, I got it. And I was like, oh, well, that was great. Okay, let's go. And she's like, and every person she came in contact to, she was like, this Band-Aid was like stuck to him, and it just would not come off. And it was just little things like that, like throughout his treatment, that God was just like, hey, I'm still here. Like I know this really sucks, but I'm still here. And like, I think that gave me a lot of strength to continue on, because I was, you know, it was just extremely hard. So he went through 2 rounds of chemo, and he lost his hair and all of that stuff, which is also really awful, like having to shave your kid's head and whatnot, and like patches falling out and stuff. I guess I feel like it'd be more traumatizing if it's a girl, but it was also just not a good time as a boy either.
Yeah.
And then we moved to a different hospital because he needed to have a bone marrow transplant too. So they had to harvest his healthy cells. So when they do that, they, you know, as you get chemo, all your numbers and your counts drop, and they go really, really low, like scary need infusion low. And then as you're coming out of the chemo, they like spike up. And when they spike up, that's like your key time to like go in and like harvest your healthy cells and whatnot. So but because this this type of cancer is so rare, they were trying to harvest it. They like have to take it out of your neck. It's whatever. And so they were doing that, and he had to fast, so he could only have like a popsicle or something.
That's tough.
And, stay still, and all of that stuff. And after the first day, they said, we didn't get enough. We have to do it again tomorrow. So he's still fasting at 3 years old and whatever. And after the second day, they said, we still didn't get enough. We have to do it again. And I was like, nope, we're not doing it again. This is inhumane at this point.
Yeah, for real.
You figure it out. Figure it out. Like, I get it. I get that his cancer is rare. I get that you don't know what, like, it's a learning curve for everybody, but like, just figure it out.
Yeah, 3 days without
3 days without food as a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
No
shot.
No shot. And so they said, like, well, you have two options. You can, we can give him another dose of chemo and we can do this again, or we can harvest it through his hip bone, the old school style, where they have to, put the needle into your bone and extract the marrow. And
I'm getting queasy thinking about that.
And they were like, as a 3-year-old, and they're like, but the plus side of that is we have somebody standing there counting to make sure you get the exact amount that you need, and then you're done. And I was like, well, he's gonna be under, so. And they're like, well, he'll have a scar. And I was like, he's got the scar on his leg. He's going to have a port scar. Like, that's not my concern.
Great for show and tell. Yeah, I wanted scars as a kid.
Yeah.
Like Anakin Skywalker. I wanted the one.
Right. Guess how I got it.
Yeah.
So we were like, yep, we're going to do that. So, and then I was just kind of annoyed. I was like, why didn't we just do this from the beginning? Like, this would have saved so much time and pain and all of the stuff. And so they harvested all of that stuff, and they tell you all of the side effects that you're going to experience, or that, Ryan's going to experience when he goes through having a bone marrow transplant. And he had to get so he already had a port on one side, and he had to have a central line placed on the other side, which so a port can handle certain doses of chemo, but the central line is bigger in a sense, and it goes to a direct place in your body so that you can get, in a sense, harsher drugs and stuff. And so it was also discussed that a feeding tube would need to be put in because of the side effects that he was going to experience. And we decided that because of certain side effects he was going to have, that putting the one that goes up your nose and down your throat was not a good option. So we did the surgical one that's down by the belly button and stuff like that. So before we went in for his last round of chemo and bone marrow, he at this point had a port, a central line, a feeding tube, and then had the leg scar, and still wasn't very balanced on that. So he basically just stayed in his bed all the time. We would just bring toys to him and lift him in and out to go to the bathroom and just stuff like that. So we got an apartment downtown by the U because we live too far away.
Yeah.
And so we were technically paying 2 mortgages. But it was necessary. And so we moved in there. And I was pretty pregnant at this point. I was probably 7.
That's so crazy that you're pregnant.
7, 8 months pregnant.
Yeah.
And we then essentially moved him into the U at the Masonic Children's Hospital. And my husband and I would take 24-hour shifts. So we'd see each other about 15 to 20 minutes a day, so we wouldn't have to pay for parking.
Yeah.
We'd just be like, okay, here's the update. Okay, see you soon. And bring each other food or whatever. And then, go back and sleep or whatever.
Yeah.
So they did the last round of chemo, and the last round of chemo that they did, essentially wiped his system. so like all his childhood vaccines and stuff that he got, all of those were just like wiped out of his system. And they then needed to do the bone marrow transplant of his healthy cells to essentially save his life, basically. And so, yeah, it was like right around Halloween, I'd say, or like right before, because all the nurses were dressed up. And he was just really out of it. He just didn't care. He was like, there's a giant dinosaur in my room. Like, that's fun. Like,
yeah, just like, totally like not just, there. Huh. Yeah, am I the meds?
Where am I right now? Like,
yeah, what in the world? What's reality and what is my medication? I have a video of him
being like, I don't know what's happening.
Poor guy.
I know. And yeah, the weirdest part about the bone marrow transplant is they tell you it smells like cream corn. And like the nurses all have like cream corn shirts. And then they literally do it and you're like, who opened a can of cream corn? Like to this day when I cook with corn, like I tear up. Like it's like a trigger that like no one told you were gonna have, you know. So that's when stuff I would say started getting really scary as he's having his like bone marrow transplant. He like at the worst of it, he was coughing up blood, or like throwing up blood, I'd say, not just coughing up blood, like throwing up blood. His oxygen levels were really low. His counts were really low. They were just blowing oxygen like into his face like all the time. Nosebleeds, couldn't get to the bathroom on his own at all. Like we were just changing his bedding and his clothes like several times a day. And then there was one point where, and like my parents were kind of coming by and like friends were coming by to like pray over us and hang out and whatnot. And like when he was in the stretch of, you know, throwing up blood and all of this stuff, like we didn't even let like my parents come. We didn't let anybody come because when my husband and I would trade places, like we were just so shocked, like each time we would see him, of how frail and like just sad it was. Like I feel like if we as his parents, every time we were coming, were like so, you know, distraught by seeing how he looked and everything, that if we were to have family or somebody come, like they wouldn't be able to handle it. And so we were like, we're just not going to do that unless we have to, unless it gets to a point where it's like you have to come and like you know. And so it was just us back and forth. And there was a point where he had horrible insomnia. Like he was up for almost like 4 days straight. He was like having like hallucinations, and he was just very erratic and like screaming and trying to like pull his lines out. And like I'm just like this very pregnant lady trying to hold him down and all this stuff. And he's just, you know, his oxygen is so low and he's so tired. And I just kept thinking, like, how is he supposed to heal if he can't sleep? Like when you sleep, like that's how your body heals itself. And I just kept thinking, like, he can't even like fall asleep for more than 5-minute periods. Like that's not sleep. You're not entering REM sleep after 5 minutes.
Yeah, for
like,
real.
And it was just so bad. It was just so bad. And so I remember I like paged one of the doctors that was on call, and I was just like, I don't know what you need to do. Like, you need to make him go to sleep. I don't care if you're changing up his pain meds. I don't care if you're giving him, you know, whatever it was. And they like changed his pain meds. They gave him some melatonin for good measure. They gave him like, they had just whole new medication cocktail. And he fell asleep pretty quickly after that. And then a team of doctors came in and said, like, Steph, it's like not looking very good. Like the fact that we have to like, you know, and I remember like texting my husband, like they want to transfer him to the ICU. And like, it's like really scary right now. And he's like, okay, well, I'll be there first thing in the morning. Like, you know, we did, like, this was talked about at some point, like, you know, and our nurses there were like just, like the best people on the planet. And I just remember like physically hitting the floor like of this, dirty hospital room, like hitting the floor and just like crying out like, God, like he cannot be part of this like statistic. Like he needs to be the 20% that survives. Like I just was like pleading with him, like this can't be it. Like this can't be it. This is my baby. Like, like it was just so overwhelming. It was so overwhelming. And I was just crying out and whatnot. And the nurses got on the floor with me and they were praying over me. And we had one nurse and she said, Steph, I go home and I pray over all of these kids. And God told me in my quiet time praying for Ryan that they will know me through this. And like, I was just like, what did you just say? And she's like, he told me they will know me through this. And I don't know who that is, but I want you to know that like that's, like I feel like Ryan's story is going to help change people's lives.
What you had already heard before
all of this started. And I was just like,
wow.
And she had like written us up this letter of like, we're all on your team. And she put like, she put a verse I haven't even used. See, she put John 16:33, and it says, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." And I like still have her letter like to this day, like in a scrapbook, like. But I was just like, what did you just say to me?
Yeah.
And I was like, and I was literally dumbfounded because it had been the exact same thing that God had said to me before we knew that it was a rhabdoid tumor, before we knew anything. Wow. He had said, they will know me through this. And she said in her quiet time with God, that God told her, they will know me through this. And she's like, I don't know what that means, but Ryan's story is gonna impact people. And I was just like, okay. And I literally like in that moment just felt God like lift me to my knee, like off my knees and whatnot. And like Ryan slept for about like 36 hours straight, and his oxygen levels came up, so they got to take the oxygen off, and he like never had to go to the ICU. And they have this thing where it's like, if you're in the hospital for more than 30 days, you have to change rooms because they have to deep clean it. Yeah. And like, we were planning to change rooms. We were like, it's just like taking forever. Like, it is what it is. And on day 30, they're like, you can go home. And well, to the apartment. Yeah. But like, we were like, okay. Like, we were expecting to not be able to go home. And they were like, everything's looking great. You can go to the apartment. And so we got to go to the apartment in 30 days. I mean, obviously it came with like me being nurse and mom. Mm-hmm. But then like about 2 weeks later, we got to go home. And, I was still nurse and mom. And I just kept thinking like, I'm going to have a baby like any day now. And like, we still don't know if Ryan is cancer free. We don't know like any of this. Like, I just can't even like process bringing another like life home right now through all of this stuff that we've just gone through. Like, obviously I'm grateful that we're home and whatnot, but it was just also like, what am I supposed to do? And so, our second son, Zach, he ended up being 2 weeks late, which was kind of a blessing because it gave us more time for Ryan to heal and more time to prepare and all of that stuff. And then, so he was born in January of 23. And then about 9 days later, we went in for Ryan's scans and learned that he was cancer free.
Amen.
And so it was literally like, like God even saying way back when I first learned to hear his voice and have a relationship with him of like, the baby will not be a burden. And I'm just thinking like, how is this baby not going to be a burden? Like, I am so overwhelmed. I am so like deep in all of this.
Wow.
And then I have the baby and they're like, yep, cancer free. And I was like, he beat the odds.
Wow.
He's like in that 20 percentile that survived. Like he is thriving. Like it is just like, I'll even say like we went to his, he had scans last week and we went to his scan review and his doctor was like, he shouldn't be here. And we're like, we know. And he's like, kids don't come out of this. And I'm like, we know. And he's like, wow. This kid is a miracle. And I'm like, yeah,
we know.
He is. We know. Like,
wow.
Even like his doctor, it's just like, this kid is a miracle. Like, I'm like, yeah, this kid is a testimony. Like this kid is and I just think like, there's so many times in like the thick of parenthood sense, of everything. And I just think like, I'm so grateful not only that Ryan is cancer free, but I'm so grateful to like be Ryan's mom. Yeah. Like it's such an honor to be able to like be his mom and like to be able to have the honor of raising him for God, and like Ryan in himself is just this kid that just like lives for Jesus. Like he just has this spirit about him of like, he wants to take care of people. He wants to give you gifts all the time. Mm-hmm. He wants to pray over his friends. He wants to pray over the kids that aren't very nice to him at school too. He just says like, Mom, they just don't know any better. We should pray for them tonight. And I'm like, man, kid, like you are like,
because you told me that kids were making fun of him or whatever. Because can you tell them that? I think that was really cool when you.
Yeah, they were making fun of his leg braces and kind of messing with him a little bit, and I said like, do you want me to contact the teacher? And he goes, well, maybe, maybe, but I think we should just pray for them because they don't know any better. And I was just like,
and how old was he when he said that?
He's 5.
Yeah, 5 years old.
He's just like, and like a kid broke his arm at school and he's like, my buddy broke his arm at school, so we need to pray for him to be healed. And I'm like, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
And he'll say like, why is it just us that goes to church? And I'm like, they're just not there yet. And he's like, I'm going to pray that the rest of the family they'll come with us. Like, like he just has this heart that he wants, the rest of the family to join him at church. Wow. Like he wants that. And he's like, well, or he said, he was at kids church one day and he said, beforehand, he was running around with me as I was helping with sound and stuff. And he said, my leg really hurts. And I was like, oh, great. Whenever he says it, it's always a little bit of a trigger of like, what do we do? And I said, okay, well, let's get through church and then we'll talk about it on the way home. And so after kids church, I said, do you want to go up and get prayed for your leg? And he goes, oh, they prayed for me at kids church. I'm healed. And he just like skipped off. And I was like, oh,
okay. Yeah.
Well, okay, great. Like he just says, he's just like, I'm good. Thanks though.
So cool.
Yeah. He's just so cute.
So, to wrap up, people that listen to this, like I said at the beginning, how easy it could have been for you to point a finger at God.
Yeah.
Why me? Why me? But being reaffirmed, I think too, it was important for you to know his voice, for him to prep you for what you were about to face. And then as you were in the trial, reaffirming it to you, so that you knew that as long as God, I'll go through this, but if you walk with me through it,
right?
If I know that you're with me, I'll go through it. How would you, what advice would you give for someone that might be going through something and they, instead of seeking him, they're really struggling in their faith, wondering, why is this happening to me? Like, God, if you're so good, why are such evil things allowed to take place or happening to me specifically? What would you tell someone that is struggling with their idea of God being good when there's evil existing in the world?
Yeah, I think I'd just say, like, God doesn't create any of the evil things. Like, everything good and perfect comes from God, and anything that's not good and perfect is from the enemy. And we don't always know why we have to go through hard things or difficult times or death of a loved one or all these trials, but he does. And like, there isn't always like a time where, like, there will be a time when we know why, and it's when we're up in heaven and he can explain it to us. But until then, like, I just have a trust and a faith in him that, like, I don't need to know. I don't need to know why. It's not important for me to know why. It's important for me to trust him and love him, which I do. And I feel like my relationship with God has just grown through it. Like, I, talk to him in the car or talk to him, whatever, like, and it's helped me, like, to explain things to my kids too. And I, and like Ryan will say, like, cause we've had lots of friends and stuff who've gone through childhood cancer that we've made this community with, since then. And, a couple months ago, one of them passed away. And I came to Ryan in tears, and he was crying, and we were both crying. And he just said, why did God heal me but not her? And it's like a conversation that you don't want to be able to, like, you don't want to have with your 5-year-old. But I said, I don't know, bud. I don't know why, but someday we'll know. And like, it's okay for us, to not know right now. But God doesn't take anybody, he takes them up because he doesn't want them to suffer anymore. And, like, we don't know why at this point, but someday we will. And I think it's for the best. And like, not that it's for the best for like, but he's good. And like, since then, this girl's parents have like started, outreaching and like, raising awareness and funds and stuff like that too. So I was like, for them to have this, heart posture as well through all of it, it's just like, it's just pretty incredible. I don't know. Like, I can't sit here and be like, oh, this is why, God puts us through all of these things. But I also just think, like, you just have to have faith. Like, that's all it is, I think. And just the thought of like, I don't know why, but I'm going to trust you through it. And
that's the important thing. When people hear faith, a lot of times when I'm talking to atheists, the common assumption when you say faith is it's placing trust. It's basically throwing up a Hail Mary or just in ignorance. Like, it's whatever. This is, it's not, it was way more than impersonal. Like, faith was a complete and utter trust, because if you don't show up, I'm done. Yeah. And I don't think people know faith in that way, because they never have a relationship with God, because they reduce it to a tradition or a religion.
100%.
And so faith is nothing more than just, I'm just going to place trust in the ignorance, which is true in a case, but in the sense of with God, it's just kind of impersonal, throw it out. You just got to have faith. It's just like a lottery ticket type thing and whatever. But for you, it was, you clung on to God. You clung on and rested in him and on his words that he gave you strength to be able to overcome that. Yeah. So it's more than just something. It was a trust in that you didn't need to know.
Yeah.
You didn't need to know. It's knowing that he is good, and all the rest of what happens or what I go through, I know that he's good, and I know that no weapon formed against me will prosper. Yep. And all of it, he does a pretty good job ruling the universe. I'm not in that seat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, like, I'll have a lot of people that'll say like, why do you raise your hands in church during worship? Like, it's so weird. It looks really culty. I've had that before. And I was like, I have literally seen God perform a miracle in my life personally that I have no other way to worship him other than to like praise and worship with my hands in the air. Like, and I'm pretty sure if you were to ask the person on the other side of you why they raise their hands in worship, that their story would be probably pretty similar, just a little different.
You should probably meet God.
I don't know. He's just just, I don't know, talk to him a little.
It's funny. It's like, people will say, this is a little bit off topic, but before we close, there is a lot of people will say, well, worship and, non-denominational churches are those churches that have all that music and all that stuff. It's all emotional manipulation. Yeah, they're just manipulating you with the sound and the music. And I'm like, so you're telling me that if you encountered a living God, you're saying that there wouldn't be some type of emotions that would be evoked upon meeting a living God, right, or experiencing a miracle, or encountering a God who literally describes himself as love.
Right.
Maybe it's you just have not met him. And you want to label it emotional manipulation. I don't know about you, but you can sit there, hate on the sidelines. I'm going to praise a God who performed miracles and saved my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of Stephen A. Smith Christians. They do a lot of analyzing the game rather than actually being in it.
Yeah.
But there is a real God, and don't settle for a piggybacked relationship or a tradition. Get to know him. Yeah. And it's so beautiful hearing your story of him reaffirming and reaffirming that he's walking with you through this, all that you're going through crap, but he's not some emotionally unavailable father that he's like, I'm right here. I'm right here.
Right here.
I haven't left you.
Yeah.
I think that's powerful. So I thank you for sharing that today. That was encouraging even for me. And I know it'll be for those that are listening right now, especially because we've been praying for that it would touch people that maybe are going through something similar and they have this jaded perspective towards God or dealing with hurt that's drawing them away and driving a wedge between them and God rather than bringing them closer. Right. So I just want to thank you guys for watching. We pray this blessed you. If you have any questions, you can email me at pastoralex@bethelsrock.org. If you're listening right now on Spotify or Apple Music, make sure you give us a rating. We greatly appreciate that. And if you don't want to miss out on any of the future testimonies or podcasts where we talk theology and answer your guys' questions, make sure you hit the subscribe button, like this video, leave a comment, and the way you don't miss out on the content is hitting that notification bell. So, and anytime we post, you'll get a notification to your phone and you'll be the first to see whatever we post. But again, thank you guys for watching. We pray this blessed you, and we will see you next week for another episode of Experience the Truth.